So really appreciate the chance to talk a little bit about our company first, just to set the table as it relates to global trade. We are an industrial technology business, and so that means we're a business-to-business entity. We focus on mission-critical sensors, and electrical protection. Sensors are a fundamental building block into the digital world. And so right now, we have tremendous opportunity. And our task is to choose wisely and deliberately for our customers, our shareholders, and our team. We're a pretty big business. Actually, we're kind of a mid-cap company, $3.5 billion, almost 22,000 employees, and we operate all around the world. But probably a couple other things. What does our name mean? It means those gifted with sense. If you actually look at our business cards, our logo is Sensata, spelled in Braille. It's got a tactile feel to it. So the notion of sensing is really important to Sensata, and it's very important to the overall world. But let's get into this notion of global trade. And for Sensata, it starts right with our mission statement and our vision. And let me explain to you why. We focus on mission-critical solutions, and that means devices that are fundamental to safety, clean and efficiency, things that are very difficult to do, and where lives depend on our solutions. So that's our market focus. We measure our success on a global basis. And we're a very global business. Now, what does that mean? A lot of people say they're a global business. For us, what that means is that we see the world not as a collection of opportunities, disparate opportunities all around geographies, with folks operating sort of independently and finding great returns in their own little countries around the world. Our fundamental premise upon which we have built this business over the past at least 30 years is that customers across geographies, when it comes to mission-critical sensors, will be solving the same problems and will gravitate to the same or similar solutions over time. That premise is really important in the way we've structured the business and the way that we go to market. So for example, when we think about some of our automotive customers, if we've got a customer in Germany who's working on improving their stopping distances for their vehicle to make them safer and make them meet regulation, we recognize that eventually that need is going to spread all around the world. And that premise has served us very, very well. So it's important to us to have global teams where the first time a new application shows up in one part of the world, that within weeks, the rest of our team is looking for that challenge in other parts of the world. Why is that important to us? When you're doing mission-critical sensors, our customers recognize how important they are. It takes years to validate our solutions. We're a long-cycle business. We're also serving end markets that are somewhat risk-adverse. So the aerospace business, automotive, industrial equipment, safety, reliability, meeting regulation, very important to these customers. So incumbency matters a lot. The idea is you get to market first, you find that opportunity all around the world, and then you build scale. That's been our fundamental business model. The point being, our business model is predicated on a big assumption that the marketplace is global and that you will be able to serve customers in an efficient way all around the world. So given some of the challenges that we see happening around global trade and tariffs, we're taking these challenges really seriously. Global trade is fundamental to our business model. What that means for us, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit here if I can. Where am I pointing? I'll come back to these. But I think one of the things that's really fundamental and important to us is that our team operates as global teams. So if you were to walk into Sensata and sit down and get involved in a project, you would find that we have team members on that project that are from China, that are from Holland, that are literally located in Northern Ireland, and they are working together to develop global solutions, put those global solutions into a supply chain that is fairly consolidated and very cost efficient. That's the nature of the work that we do. And so one of the first things that we have to do is to make sure that any rancor in the world and divisiveness in the world is not felt on our teams. We value global teams, and we take that seriously. We communicate together all the time. Saturday morning, I will be on the 6 a.m. flight on my way to China. It's just a part of what we do. So that global teaming, super important. The communication side of it, very important. Cultural understanding, really important as well. That's part of our culture, and that's part of the way we go to market. So let's step back a little bit. Some of the other things that become important is making sure that we operate in parts of the world that make sense when you look at developing economic proposals and efficiency in what we do. We have about 11 manufacturing sites around the world, but we actually manufacture about 80% of what we do in about 6 or 7 sites. So it's a fairly consolidated model. And there's no question that we have products shipping out of the country of origin into other countries. So a very fundamental way in the way we operate is that we are cross-border all the time. At the same time, we have engineering locations that are fairly regional. One of the most important locations is our headquarters right here in Attleboro, Massachusetts, where we have about 1,000 people that work for Sensata. And we tend to allocate our work in a way that we have centers of expertise. So we are very strong, for example, in tire pressure sensing in Northern Ireland. We do a lot of the work for the globe in that location. We have another center for that in China. At the same time, it's very important when we operate in a country that we operate locally. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that notion of a global strategy, but very local presence, is supremely important to Sensata. We don't start from scratch every time we're doing a new sensor. We try to reuse the fundamental building block for different end markets, different customers, and we customize those to the needs of the customer. So that creates an efficiency, but a need to collaborate and cooperate all around the world. These are a couple of examples. You can see that same technology in everything from mobile climate control systems. You can see them now. We're actually being designed into battery systems on electric vehicles to protect for thermal runaway, using that exact same technology. So it spans across a number of different end markets and things that we do. So there is the backdrop, and what I've told you is global trade is really, really fundamental to who we are and what we do. At the same time, we're watching what's happening in the world, and we're finding a way to continue to thrive despite some of these challenges. And I hope that we'll get into this into the panel. So how are we responding to some of the challenges that we've had? Well, one of the things that we've recognized is, we've been in China, and we are a China player. Okay, we've been almost wholly owned for almost 30 years in China. So we're coming from a position, I think, of really understanding both the local businesses in China, the multinational businesses in China, and being as concerned about the impact on China to some of the tariffs and trade as we are, quite frankly, in the US, because these are our team members and this is our customer base. We have, at the same time, recognized a number of things. China has a lot of challenges. The tariff and trade is one challenge that they have. The cost of labor in China has been increasing, fairly consistently over a number of years. The logistics cost of coming out of China and exporting from there has become less attractive. So over time, we've become much more self-contained in China. So by the time some of the trade and tariff came into play, while it has had impacts on our business, we've been able to actually mitigate some of that. We'll talk about how we've done some of that probably when we get into the panel discussion. But most of what we do in China actually stays in China. to the extent that we've had things still that we're exporting, we do mission critical products, so we actually produce the same products or the same technologies in multiple locations around the world. And we've had to move those supply chains to deal with some of the issue. It really has been important in the middle of this, though, to constantly reassure customers all around the world that we will find a way to continue to serve them and be efficient and economic, and so far we've been able to do that. In terms then of how do we do that, the one bit of advice, and I think this will come up again, is that we, I think, have been very proactive on this issue. And I would go back to things like tweets in the 2016 timeframe around some of the candidates, really recognizing that given the history, frankly, of our current president, that things could change from a global trade perspective. We brought in more professionals on that front. Ken Karlstadt's with us. He's our head of our trade office at Sensata. And we established a control tower. And so what we do in that control tower is every time an issue begins to develop, the control tower pulls in people all across Sensata, and we start to do scenario planning and ask ourselves how we would respond. And I'll give you an example. So Brexit right now, still a very real issue. A range of outcomes on that. We have a large presence in Northern Ireland from which we export. So we still don't know if it's going to be a hard exit, whether there's going to be a customs unit, but we have positioned inventory outside of the UK to give us time and to make sure that we're protecting our customers if supply chains become more prolonged. That would be an example of how we've dealt with that. So that's a little bit about the backdrop of Sensata, how we're dealing with current issues. And at the same time, global trade and tariffs are only one aspect of what we're dealing with in the business. So we have to stay vigilant there and agile. And at the same time, we are responding to changes in the world that are fundamentally disrupting the end markets that we sit in. We're at the point now where that change represents great opportunity for Sensata. And it also allows us to make sure that the solutions we bring to market are really vital and they're really sustainable and differentiated. And I will tell you that given how difficult it's getting to be around trade, that has to be your starting point. We are as vital and as important to our customers in India as we are in Germany. And so when there's pressure to have the whole world become self-contained or cut off, it's really important to have solutions that local competitors will not be able to compete with in a very viable way. We're doing that against these trends today. We're focused on things like clean and efficient, the need for increasingly lower levels of emissions is really important in our business. And that's a requirement all around the world, whether you're dealing with National 6 mandates in China or whether you're dealing with Euro 7 mandates that are on the horizon in Europe. We see that regulation happening all around the world. There's a lot of pattern recognition that comes with that, and we provide solutions that respond to that need. Increasingly, we're focused on electrification, and we've got a great portfolio now to make sure that when the automotive market transitions at some point in a meaningful way, and eventually we think it will get there, to electric vehicles and plug-in electric vehicles, that we're going to have the portfolio for that. And I will tell you today, China will be the largest market for electrified vehicles, and we're playing there in a meaningful way. Farther out on the horizon is autonomy. Driverless cars will happen someday, but before we get to that, we're dealing with driverless material handling, robots in warehouses and elsewhere. So it's an important growth theme for us as well. And we're also have an initiative around smart and connected. So sensors, the fundamental building block to get digital insights into the hands of folks like fleet managers and worksite managers. And we're moving from just sensors to software and other solutions to realize that growth. This is an example then of some of the things that we're bringing into electrification. We made an important acquisition at the end of last year that allowed us to bring a portfolio of high voltage contactors. And all you need to know about those is that if you recharge your vehicle at 400 volts, or 800 volts, which is where charging stations are going, and you don't have one of these on the car or in the charging station, it's really dangerous. So it's important functionality that we're now bringing into the EV world. We're bringing some of our current technology into things like battery packs. We're focused now on wirelessly bringing sensor information out of the battery packs and the batteries and into a control center in the vehicle, and also available for insights on folks that are managing their fleets. So some of the examples of where Sensata is going in a world that's quite disruptive at this point. Another theme that you will increasingly see at Sensata, and I would encourage others to think about, is partnership. And so given some of the challenge in global trade, the ability to go it alone on all fronts, unless you have enormous reserves. If you're a Google, you probably can still do it, probably Amazon. But for most of us, it's important that we be able to play, but we find ways to do that, run some experiments, do it with partners, make sure that the investments are going to pay off, and then begin to invest in a more meaningful way. And we've done that, for example, in areas like battery management, where we've made an investment in a company based in Denmark that's got great technology around battery management. Lots of examples of that at Sensata. I talked a little bit about this notion of moving from just the sensor layer now into bringing digital insights into fleet managers in particular. So this is a new initiative at Sensata. We are very strong with OEM-based customers. This allows us to attack a $6 billion opportunity to retrofit commercial trucks and trailers with sensors and vehicle gateways and software that then brings insights to fleet managers. And what does that let them do? Well, in the world of trade, getting product on ground across the country is really, really important. Increasingly, that last leg is important as we've all moved our commerce online. And so utilization on that equipment is something those customers really, really care about, and something that we're very focused on. So kind of an exciting initiative at Sensata. So I'm going to just end here with some thoughts so we can move into the panel discussion. And I think a couple of things I would encourage you to think about as you think about international opportunities. In my opinion, you have to be a little bit bimodal when you think about that. First of all, you have to have solutions that are competitive and differentiated. And make sure you know what the competitive landscape looks like and what the cost of serving looks like in different countries as you make those decisions. There are opportunities to lower that cost of doing business. I thought there was a great one that we heard about this morning with globalization partners. If you think about the opportunity to maybe make that cost variable when you begin, and then build on it as you go. But you have to have a solution that's highly differentiated across end markets if you're going to actually move in a global way. Our president in China all the way down are Chinese nationals with a few exceptions. They understand the market. They allow us to be very responsive to that marketplace. We have long service tenures with those employees. We've actually won a patent, we've protected a patent in China in the past. It's not easy to do. We worry about reverse engineering all the time, but we have the same market share positions in China that we have in our mature markets, so you can do it, and that would be my message to you. And then really taking a look at doing the proactive scenario planning and evolving your strategy as new realities come into play. So I think we're going to talk about this a lot more on the panel. I'll stop here, and I think that's what we're going to do next.